Enlisted is a first-person shooter, so what do you do in it? Well, shoot people, obviously. But even more important is, what do you shoot them with? And today I will answer this question for you. Hello, welcome, this is your favorite number cruncher and game stat analysis enjoyer, and today we will take a look at weapon stats and what makes a weapon good. Enlisted weaponry actually has a lot of stats. All the stats I've lifted off the UT datasheet that I love dearly. I will go over each of them and explain how they correlate with each other and how do they impact your gameplay.
Now that's a lot of damage!
First off, probably the most important stat is the damage and the damage drop-off. Fights are won thanks to having lower time to kill, so having as much damage and dealing it at the fastest pace is what you are trying to achieve. As you know, in Enlisted you have 10 HP or 13.5 HP when you're using Vitality perk. I will use 13.5 HP reference point because that's what majority of people are using, and if they're not using it, well, they're probably not a threat anyway. The damage dictates two things. One, how many bullets you need to kill an enemy, and two, what is the effective range of the weapon. So if your weapon deals above 13.5 damage, it's going to one-shot and it's going to be exponentially better than any weapon that deals below that. However, weapons damage is reduced with distance traveled, which in turn creates a sort of hidden stat of effective range. Effective range is the distance at which the weapon retains its initial X-shot potential before it starts needing another bullet to down an enemy. Best example of effective range can be presented when using Type H automatic versus any other select fire rifle. Type H auto deals 13.9 damage at 10 meters range and 10.8 damage at 100 meter range. We can create this formula and simplify it to figure out that at 21 meter range the Type H auto starts needing a second bullet to down an enemy. Other select fire rifles have 15.3 damage, which in turns give you 68 meter one-shot range. So despite both weapons having above 13.5 damage, Type H auto has lower effective range due to having lower damage point and higher damage drop-off.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as fuck, boy!
Velocity is the speed at which bullets travels in meters per second. This affects your game mainly in three ways. First and foremost, low velocity increases time to kill. For example, at 50 meter range, Thompson can kill an enemy with 2 bullets. But shooting out the second bullet doesn't kill the enemy instantly, as the bullet first has to travel 50 meter range, which in turn increases your TTK by the bullet travel time. Velocity is one of the reasons why Thompsons, despite having one of the best stats overall in the game, are not absolutely gongo broken, as you need to account for their abysmal velocity and their increase on your time to kill. The second way it affects your game is having to lead your crosshair further up on moving enemies. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just the way you have your lead indicator on planes, you have to have a mental lead indicator on the moving enemies, and having low velocity just makes it that much harder to hit them. And finally, your bullet is affected by having shorter range and simply falling down to the ground after traveling less distance. This requires you to aim higher when fighting at long distances, but this is arguably the least important factor, but sometimes can cause you to hit the pelvis instead of torso and deal less damage, so it's important to keep it in mind.
That's quite big. Impressive.
Magazine size is pretty self-explanatory. The more bullets you have, the better. However, the most important thing about mag sizes is how well they support the gun's fire rate. If your gun's rate of fire is extremely high and your magazine size is extremely low, you're going to be reloading constantly, which in turn makes killing enemies much harder. The mag size is what balances weapons like Beretta 1918 that has over 1000 rate of fire at BR2, but only 25 rounds in the mag. The high rate of fire is indirectly nerfed by the need to reload and giving you lower average rate of fire because you're adding your reload time to your shooting time per every 25 bullets.
Remember, switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading.
Reload time ties directly to the magazine size and the rate of fire. It is essentially the factor by which weapon has its average rate of fire reduced. For example, Thompson .30 cal is one of the strongest weapons in BR3 thanks to its high damage and great rate of fire. However, it has rather small magazine capacity for its rate of fire, so you have to reload it constantly. Thankfully, the reload time on it is very quick, which makes the effects of the small magazine size less noticeable and decreases your average rate of fire by a smaller factor, and by this increases your average damage output. Rate of fire is how fast your weapon shoots out bullets. It seems rather straightforward, the faster the better because it lowers your time to kill, but it actually isn't that simple because the rate of fire affects plenty of other stats that affect your gameplay in other ways. High rate of fire can also unironically lower your time to kill, as you can run into something called bullet bleed. Bullet bleed is essentially wasting bullets dueling through auto, either by shooting out too many before you can switch to another target, or a dead body getting shot additional time before it can get out of the way of enemy soldier. This happens naturally for all guns, but can be more noticeable for higher rate of fire ones. It is however not considered most of the time, because wasting one more bullet at a higher rate of fire is amended by, well, shooting them out faster anyway, so it's not that detrimental. And finally, the rate of fire also affects your recoil, because the faster you shoot out the bullets, the more recoil is being applied per second. Speaking of which, recoil is how much your gun's crosshair moves left, right, and up, down while shooting. Those directions are separated into two different categories, being horizontal and vertical recoil. On the stat card you can find the recoil values, as well as recoil control. Recoil control is essentially how much of the recoil is actually applied, and why is it this way instead of just being the value? Don't ask me, I have no idea, it just doesn't make sense. The vertical recoil is easier to control, but at the same time it usually has much higher values compared to the horizontal one. Horizontal recoil is much harder to control, because you have to adjust for left and right movement instead of just pulling your mouse down, but at the same time you're usually facing much less horizontal recoil compared to the vertical one. As mentioned, recoil is directly tied to your rate of fire, as each shot moves your crosshair. This is why it's a common misconception that FOT 4020 has higher recoil than FG 42.2, when it's actually the opposite. While FG 42.2 has a lower recoil on the stat card, but it having higher rate of fire actually makes it recoil per second worse compared to the FOT one. There are several factors that affect your recoil. Perks can decrease your recoil, crouching and laying decrease your recoil, bayonets reduce your recoil by 10%, mounting weapons with bipods reduce your recoil significantly, and leaning actually increases your recoil. Recoil direction is a weird stat because it dictates which direction your gun is going to move when you're shooting it. For example, any gun with recoil direction of 0.3 will make horizontal recoil move your weapon only to the right side when you're shooting it. This is rather neutral stat because having recoil only move to the right makes it more predictable, but at the same time having recoil move left and right keeps the crosshair relatively on target, so it's usually not taken into consideration when balancing weapons.
All of you!
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
Like recoil control, recoil offset increases your recoil by a certain factor. Why? I wish I knew, because it seems just so extremely unnecessary. The higher the recoil offset, the worse your recoil gets. Most guns in the game have values of 0.1 to 0.3. If a gun ever feels like it has significantly more recoil compared to another, despite having the same actual recoil, this is likely the culprit. I don't think it's an important balancing factor, as it's usually tied to the weapon type, and all it does is just makes the devs have to adjust the recoil values by a smaller or larger amount compared to it if the recoil offset stat didn't exist.
I'm going to have to put on my fucking double seeing glasses because I can't even begin to see the amount of bullshit coming from you.
Visual recoil is how much your gun jumps around visually. It doesn't move your crosshair anywhere, it just moves other parts of the gun around, which can be confusing sometimes, but as long as you focus on the crosshair, you're fine. This stat is probably responsible for the misconception that Fedorov Automat has a high recoil, because actually it only has 16 vertical and 5 horizontal actual recoil, as well as the 0.3 recoil offset, which is almost identical to the laser gun that the tape high auto is. It simply just bounces around a bit and confuses a lot of people that are not paying attention. The stat is mostly just visual, and even dare to say that it's an immersion stat rather than actual balancing factor, but too much visual recoil can be distracting and obnoxious.
You call that shooting? I'll show you some real shooting. Now beat that, varmint. Gee, that's tough. But I'll try.
Arguably one of the most important factors. Dispersion is how far from the center of your crosshair the bullet will hit. The higher the dispersion, the larger the angle of the center that the bullet can go, forming what is called a dispersion cone. This is not uniform and bullets are still more likely to hit the center of your screen, but it's still a very important factor. This is essentially an RNG check whether you will need additional bullet to kill an enemy that grows with engagement distance. It kinda sucks because it's RNG at whatever you will hit your shot or not, but it does serve an important role. Imagine you have a weapon that 2 shots at 400 rate of fire and a weapon that 3 shots at 300 rate of fire. They are technically equal as both have the same TTK, but let's say at some point, for example 50 meters, the former weapon starts to 3-shot due to damage drop-off. Now the 400 rate of fire weapon is significantly worse because now it needs 3 shots due to damage drop-off but only have 2/3 of the other weapon's RPM. However, by increasing dispersion on the faster shooting gun, you can increase the average bullet it needs to kill due to misses caused by dispersion. If on average beyond that 50 meter mark, the faster firing weapons hits 3 shots out of 6 that it shot out, you are getting a TTK of 600 milliseconds. To match this, you need to hit 3 shots out of 4 shot out at 400 rate of fire, which also amounts to 600 milliseconds time to kill. This is of course all theoretical values, but you get the idea. By decreasing the numbers of shots you hit on average, you can increase the TTK on the weapon, matching it with lower rate of fire ones that require the same amount of shots to kill. A lot of people disregard this stat, but it's honestly one of the most important stats in the game, because it's pure RNG and you just cannot jump over it. Moving spread increase is divided in 2 categories, while aiming and while hip firing. The moving spread increase while aiming is how much your spread increases while you're aiming down sights and moving around, which is pretty self-explanatory from how it's called. It affects very little guns and mostly machine guns. It makes it so sometimes it's better to stop moving while you're aiming with an MG, so that your spread stays tighter and you are more likely to hit your shots. This is also what makes the RD-44 an incredibly powerful gun, as its moving spread increase while aiming is 0, which makes it as accurate while standing still as while moving around. Moving spread increase while hip firing, on the other hand, is how much your spread increases while you are moving and hip firing your weapon. It matters quite a bit in CQC combat, as you want to start shooting the enemy even before you aim your weapon, and lower hipfire dispersion allows you for easier time hitting your enemy. For a majority of weapons categories like rifles and SMGs, the values are rather uniform, as they perform pretty similarly. The most diversity happens in the machine gun category, where the values I believed are used to counteract MGs with high ammo capacity and good rate of fire, so that using them in close quarters combat while moving makes you miss more of the shots instead of being able to just mow down everyone and everything. But honestly, at best, it's an educated guess. Aim down sight speed is essentially how fast you can go from hip fire to a shooting position. This is what shrinks the aforementioned dispersion cone. The base ADS speed is important as it allows you to get more accurate shots quicker, which increases your odds of winning the fight. This is one of the factors that makes a lot of MGs not really great weapons overall, as they are rather sluggish with their ADS speed factors. As it stands, it is believed that the ADS speed perk doesn't actually change how fast your dispersion cone shrinks and is purely visual, making it a pure placebo perk. Sprint factor is how fast you can sprint with certain weapons. Some weapons like the Offenrohr AT launcher blocks your ability to sprint completely. Some weapons like machine guns reduce your sprint factor by about 50%, which makes you extremely slow to move around. This is why most weapons that are regarded as best MGs in the game are BAR, KE7 and RD-44, as they give you 70 to 80% sprint factor and allow for quicker movement on the map and better map presence. It doesn't necessarily make your weapon better directly, but it ties to core enlisted ideas of tempo, so it's still pretty important. Weight of the weapon only affects your stamina. The more weight your soldier carries, the quicker their stamina depletes. That's why you can notice your AT gunners, as they carry additional weight via the AT guns, can be sometimes left behind as they're running out of stamina quicker and can't keep with other soldiers who keep on sprinting. Long story short, the lighter the weapon, the better. But usually the differences between the same class weapons are small enough to be neglected, but some weapons do carry a lot of weight, so it's important to keep it in mind.
I need more bullets! I need more bullets!
Ammo reserve is how much spare ammunition you are carrying for your weapon. It's important as it allows your soldier to stay effective in fights for longer without the need to build or visit the ammo box. It doesn't affect your TTK or gunplay directly in any manner, it's just how long your gun can stay effective for. Usually high rate of fire and low damage weapons like SMGs have more ammo in reserve, as they obviously going to eat through that ammo reserve pretty damn quickly. You can see this stat be changed from time to time on the Devil's blocks, but balancing it is pretty straightforward, as you want to hit a sweet spot where you have enough bullets to never run out when you're playing aggressively, but you're going to need an ammo box if you're just camping around. Once the sweet spot is hit, the weapon ammo reserve is usually never touched again unless other stats of the gun change. Guns with similar role and gunplay, like Fedorov Automat and Scotty Naval Rifle, have almost identical total ammo reserves. On the other hand, bolt-action rifles have about half the ammo of semi-automatic rifles, just because bolt actions kill the enemies outright, while the semi-automatic guns down them first and you need another shot to actually kill them, which translates to twice the ammo count for the same amount of kills. That will be all for today. I hope that you learned something new and that you now have greater insight to what weapon will fit your playstyle the best. Remember to like, subscribe and leave a comment about your favorite weapon and why do you like it down below, and I will see you next time. See ya!